Hello and welcome back to Everyday Writers, your one-stop shop for demystifying the writing process. I'm one of your hosts, Crystal McQueen.
And I'm your other host, Jordan S. Keller. And on today's bonus author interview, we would like to welcome to the show Laura Clarke Walker.
Laura Clarke Walker is our first international guest calling in from England. She's an English teacher and previously worked in advertising as a copy editor, a copywriter, and a content manager. Her debut novel, Coldharbour, a Gothic tale of love and death, released this year. Welcome to the show, Laura.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's very exciting.
So, can you give our listeners a rundown of your book?
Of course, so Coldharbour is fundamentally a very Gothic book. Like technically, it's urban fantasy, but there's definitely some horror undertones where this 30-year-old Alex Wilde, she's been away from hometown for a while after things have happened. She's returning. She wants to get her life back on track. She needs to get a job, a home. She wants her daughter to live with her again. But obviously, things have to happen, like accidentally meeting what's going to be the love of her life,
Oh.
trying to stop a supernatural serial killer, also unearthing all of these dark family secrets. So just try to balance everything as a working mother, but also dealing with these very paranormal events that are happening in her hometown, which is Coldharbour, a seaside town set in Essex. And she has what's called power with a capital P. So it's like this hereditary magic, which you'd think would be a good thing, a useful skill to have, but it's been the bane of Alex's life. So she also has to contend with trying to work out if it's a help or a hindrance. And yeah, that's essentially her character arc, trying to contend with all of these things that she has on her plate while trying to stay alive and kind of save the town as well.
That is an impressive endeavor to balance all of those things in one book.
It is a lot. And also the first book takes place over about 5 days. So it's a hectic time for her. It's essentially a long
Yeah.
weekend of absolute
Wow.
chaos. Which I know sounds, yeah, a
Yeah,
lot.
I
It's a
wouldn't
lot.
recommend it. So on your website, you say that ghost stories have influenced your writing. Is there a specific one or a specific cluster of them that inspired Coldharbour?
Oh, you're absolutely right. I'd say there's a lot, but I would say M.R. James's ghost stories in particular, partly because they tend to be set in these very desolate coastal towns, often in a place called East Anglia, which is on the North Sea. It's not as population dense as, say, the rest of the southeast around London. So in all these stories, you get these kind of old churches and windswept beaches and these really old kind of horrors and terrors that people accidentally unearth. And these stories are really popular here, and they often get turned into TV adaptations, especially around Christmas. In the UK, we love ghost stories at Christmas, hence like A Christmas Carol, etc.
Mhm.
And so I'd say those definitely have the biggest influence in terms of like pure ghost stories, but also The Woman in Black by Susan Hill is definitely a huge influence in terms of the book, the play versions. Again, it's so atmospheric and just I think the English seaside is just slightly terrifying in that way, where it's a bit too quiet and inexplicable things happen. So I've definitely taken my inspiration from M.R. James and Susan Hill in particular, definitely.
Super cool.
Well, like Coldharbour, in general, like I just picture the seaside in England being very cold. And so
Yes.
so it like it's fitting like all of my images of what this is. So before I ask my next question, I have another one because you mentioned that this is the first book. How many books are in this series?
So it's again a very good question because originally this was going to be a standalone, and to be honest, it still finishes in a fairly complete sense. There are some dangling questions, but you could definitely read just this book and be relatively
Hmm.
satisfied.
Okay.
But obviously, there are dangling questions, and so many more family secrets. Like I think Cold Harbor is a series where you get answers to some questions, but then you get more questions. So potentially there are novels, but there's definitely one or two, maybe shorter novellas, novelettes, dotted about because really there's a whole family of characters. So sometimes you see some people's points of view, other times you
Oh,
don't, and all these secrets coalesce around them. So it really the whole story deserves to be told over quite a few books, but definitely 5 novels maximum.
5 novels plus 2 novellas. Is that what you said?
Exactly. That's
Okay.
probably the plan.
Okay.
Let's see.
Harry Pottering it, right? Like 7 books. Like that's what
Oh,
we're
Let's do
going
it.
for.
absolutely.
Okay, so going to my original question is Coldharbour has that gripping sense of a setting where it's set in the 1980s, which in my opinion is like the best decade, in Essex, England. And those beautiful pictures that you keep posting on Instagram of like inspiration from your novel. Can you talk to us about your process about incorporating that setting, both place and time, and how you were able to incorporate that into your novel?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm a very visual person. I have a photographic memory.
Wow.
Yes, I'm extremely visual. So when it comes to say auditory things, not so great. But when it comes to picturing things and imagining things, I'm very strong in that area. And really, a lot of these places that I do take pictures of, I have grown up around or I've been on holiday to. And even if they're not necessarily in the same geographical area, like I do love these real desolate places. And I always say Coldharbour is a bit of a love letter to the English seaside town because like as you guys said, it is quite desolate. It's generally very calm. Like their heyday was definitely Victorian times, and definitely by the time you get to the end of the last century and now, there's no investment. The glamour has very much
Oh,
worn off in that slightly faded way, but it's also so Gothic to me because Gothic
yeah.
has always been about these kind of slightly ruined places or again neglected, abandoned. So to me, it was a really natural combination. And I'm also a very multisensory person. So you all can always really again smell like the salt on the wind and you can hear the waves. And really, I've always had the setting in my head, the setting, the characters, the story came later. But really, by the time I was about 18 or 19, because this idea has been in my head for a long time, a very long time now. If I were to write a novel, it would be somewhere like that, just because, like, I love our cities. Our cities are great, but our seaside towns, I think, are the most atmospheric places we have in the UK, in my opinion.
That's
Got me itching to
amazing.
visit so bad.
I know, I'm just like, come here, it's so great.
Just selling it. So Coldharbour focuses on a family that investigates serial killers, exorcise demonic spirits, make shaky alliances with some vampires, other things that you've mentioned.
Yeah.
Which part has been your favorite to write, and what else is in store for the Wild family?
Oh, I have a suspicion. It's going to sound really sounds like I'm picking a favorite child, but
No, no,
I
no.
think that I know so about that. I think book 2 is going to end up being my favorite. So book 2 comes out on Halloween, which is I guess a bit of kind of exclusive news at this point.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing with
And
us.
essentially, I know you're welcome. And I can sum it up as literally vampires at Christmas. So it's very kind of again very atmospheric. But it was with snow, there were blizzards, and
Mhm.
essentially Alex and Elizabeth are in a situation where they've never encountered vampires before. They don't even know that vampires are real because before that they've been dealing with just like power and demons and evil spirits. Makes sense.
Mhm.
Weird dreams, and then they're in a situation where vampires have clearly come to town, and it's Christmas time, and obviously at Christmas time, no one's really paying attention, and not single-handedly, double-handedly have to kind of brush off their investigating skills after a year of spoiler for book 1, a normal life. And
Normal.
I love vampires anyway, and obviously like I say, Christmas here is a bit. So while I love the other stories in Coldharbour that I've written, I
Mhm.
think that's going to be my favorite. And I think if any readers out there really love vampires as well, they're going to really, well, hopefully, enjoy what I do with that.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Ooh. The idea of like vampires next to a Christmas tree with carols, like it's such a unsettling image in my head. I love it.
Oh, it makes me think of
Yeah,
the
again, it's so dark, it's so cold.
Yeah.
what are they in Doctor Who? The Weeping Angels. That's what
Yes,
it makes
oh,
me
I
that's what it
love
makes
Ooh.
me
Doctor
think
Who.
of.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a tree topper that I almost got, but it would have scared my kids when they were younger. And it was a weeping angel and it was two-faced. And every time that the
Oh
tree
my
would rotate,
gosh.
it would change the view of the angel's face. And I was like, this is perfect. But our kids were like 8 and 11 at the time. And so it was like,
Uh,
well, let's not ruin Christmas for the kids.
Yeah, yeah,
well,
good
I don't
thinking.
know. Maybe they need just a little scare. I think that's what we really
Right?
believe in the UK. Again, with Doctor Who being so big, it's like we scare our children young. We just traumatize them, and then they end up writing books like Coldharbour. That's what we do.
And it fuels their creative energy. That's perfect. Well,
Exactly.
maybe I've just stunted my
You
kids to
missed
be
out.
accountants or something. I don't know. So I want to talk to you a little bit about speculative fiction because that is my genre. I do love fiction quite a bit. So let me talk about let's talk about what that means to you. So what drives the speculative fiction in your book, and how do you balance that with reality?
Ooh, that's a
Sorry, was that
fantastic
too
question
big?
because no, it's a great question because I'm going to be honest with you. So before I decided to go the indie route, I started to query, and I never had any idea of how to actually describe Coldharbour genre-wise. And then
Oh,
luckily, a really, really lovely agent said, "Oh, don't worry, it's speculative fiction." So I went off and Googled it. I went, "Oh, perfect," because I kept saying like, "Well, it's urban fantasy, but also Gothic horror, and it's paranormal."
Yeah.
And if and the term speculative fiction, I was like, oh, thank God. So to me, I would say I love the inherent flexibility of it, where you really can put on a really diverse set of influences and you can really play around with things. Because again, for example, within fantasy, there are so many subgenres, and the same for horror and sci-fi.
yeah.
And again, like
Hmm.
even the rest of the Coldharbour stories tend to pull on slightly different things. Again, like book two being more vampires. There's one that's a bit, so many spoilers, but there's one that's a bit more, shall we say. Another one dips a bit more into body horror. And I feel
Ooh.
like with a lot of other genres, it would be very difficult potentially to explore so many different ideas within a series. Whereas with speculative fiction, I think you can play around with the boundaries more because you can kind of mix and match a bit more. So I think I'll always be a speculative writer, but
Mm.
again, like it's such a huge sandbox to play
Same.
in, which for
Same
me
there.
is perfect. Great, isn't it?
I prefer to have little rules in my writing. So our podcast, Everyday Writers, likes to focus on the craft of writing. So Laura, we'd love to hear from how you go from idea to finished project. What's sort of your writing outline? Are you a plotter, a pantser? What are some of your steps you take?
So I'm definitely a plotter, which one of my best writing friends finds hilarious because she's a total pantser. And she finds my outlines hilarious. Like I recently sent her the outline I had done for Coldharbour 5, and the document
Mhm.
was 4,000 words. um, I
Yes.
didn't even
That's a short
realize
story.
until I shared it with her. So I would say, like I said earlier, like Coldharbour in terms of the place and the characters came really easily.
Mhm.
The
Mm.
story, not so much. So for the first book, I had to work for years, to be honest, in the sense of learning how to write a novel, and actually learning my craft and like how tight plotting actually works, where the beats need to hit. But
Hmm.
I would say with every book I've written, it's become a lot more instinctive. I don't have to change so much. Whereas before, I'd be restructuring loads, which would really frustrate me because I had
Mhm.
obviously done chapter by chapter outlines, which I was then changing, whereas now, luckily, I'm not quite so much like that. But I would say I tend to start with what I want to see the characters doing and how I want them to develop. Because although I'd say most of the books are fairly standalone, I've always known how Alex and Matthew Wilde end up by the very end.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's always been a main consideration of, okay, well, how are they both developing as characters? What also are the family dynamics?
Mm.
But then beyond that, like I said, also just fun things I want to explore, like the vampires or the time travel or the more body horror Alice in Wonderland one. So it's half really serious writerly considerations about character arcs, and narrative thrust, and the other half is like what would actually be really fun, because I really love to write what I love to read.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
that's really a primary consideration for me. And I love to read really spooky stuff. So I'm like, how can I make this thing spooky and fun and slightly chaotic? So yeah, I'd say I try to balance the serious with the more like, it's meant to be quite fun. It's gothic. It's a bit weird.
Some
That is
campy vibes.
wonderful. And also, you and I definitely vibe. Totally a plotter. I need to know exactly where, like, the beginning, the middle, and the end. I don't do it from the character's perspective. That was interesting. Like, I know what I want to happen to my character at the beginning and the end, and kind of that tipping point in the middle. But that's a really interesting approach. Well, that is all the time that we have for this episode of Everyday Writers. Laura, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah,
Can
thank
you
you.
can you tell our listeners where they might find out more about you and your writing?
So I have a website. It's lauraclarkwalker.com, all one word, and you can find out more about my writing, about Coldharbour. There are blogs, there are pictures, and also I'm very active on Instagram again at Laura Clarke Walker, all one word. I
So,
do have the special edition, which is fancier than the Amazon version because it's got gold and embossing and all good stuff.
wow.
At the I know it's so good. At the moment, that's available from Waterstones, which is essentially like our Barnes and Noble. And I
Okay.
have a couple of American friends who have ordered the fancy version, I presume from Waterstones. Once Cold Harbor 2 comes out, I'm going to be selling the special editions through my website directly. And
Oh,
Yeah, that's great.
perfect. And if you love what you hear on Everyday Writers, hit that subscribe button down below and give Crystal and I a follow over on Instagram.
And don't forget, every day is a good day to write. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.